The dismantling code, Kira. I need it to extract you from the simulation. The voice didn't sound like Allison, my treatment nurse plugged into the program with me. It was more of a disembodied murmur, like she was trying to hide her real one. This time, the voice speaking into my skull didn't sound mechanical, or at least, not what I was used to. Instead, it carried the real world, which was slowly bleeding into me breath by breath, splintering through the simulation with it. I sensed my body. I was stiff. And with that feeling starting to blossom back into my physical self, I felt it. The metallic thing plugged directly into the back of my mind and spine, a snake-like device burrowing into the meat of my brain. However advanced in technology this treatment was, the thing wasn't stable. I sensed old attempts to force this thing into me, cavernous holes in my head and old and new blood dripping in beads down my neck. It was so cold. I had already gotten a glimpse of it before, but this was more like being thrust inside icy waves of water, suspended in a vicious current. The real world was numbing, painful, so painful my body and mind was struggling to fully register it. I felt my own glacial fingers and 3 pairs of frozen hands and wrists cruelly bound to mine. As I battled with these new sensations, more slammed into me, a frozen breeze whipping my hair across my face. I craved reality at that moment. Instead of drowning inside the memory of what I had done to my best friend, I needed clarity. I needed the real world, no matter how painful it was. I wanted it enough to try and attach myself to an anchor, to my own strangled breath caught in my throat and my icy fingers caught in rope, cruelly binding me to a stranger. No, there was more than one stranger, and we had been there a while, judging from my loss of feeling, of all sensation in my arms, legs, torso. My body was close to freezing to death, and yet my mind was blissfully ignorant, still plunged into the program, hiding me from this, numbing me from the reality I wasn't supposed to see. But why? I thought dizzily. I expected a high-tech facility as part of my treatment. Instead, why was I freezing to death? Kira, do you not hear me? Allison, or the mechanical voice in my head droned. Please tell me the dismantling code. Again, her voice had adapted what could be compared to human emotion. Allison sounded impatient. 4879. The numbers in front of me were brighter than the memory, like I was supposed to reach forwards and touch them. Her words confused me for a moment as I teetered on the edge of hysteria, trapped in limbo between 3 different worlds. The real world, which was slowly bleeding back into me. The crumbling simulation of a bus with faceless passengers growing progressively more erratic. And memory, where I was 17 years old with the members of my drama club, covered in my best friend, standing on my school stage in front of the horrified faces of our family after eating her. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, and the screaming masses being held back by cops blurred into an audience of smiling faces and comically wide eyes. They were clapping. I could even see my mother in the front row with the biggest and proudest smile on her face. Kira, you are seeing what you want to see, Allison hummed. Look again. I will remove the filter, though please refrain from attempting to pull yourself from this trauma instance. She paused. You should be able to see the dismantling code in front of you, but first, take everything in. We ask our patients to accept the cause of their trauma before removing the poisoned memory and healing them. In your case, trauma instance 26 is at the root. While it is not quite the case of your debilitating mental state, it definitely played a part. Following her instructions, I did look again, my vision blurring. This memory was 5 years ago, and yet it still felt so fresh in my mind, as if it hadn't been buried deep down in an attempt to fix then heal, and then contort it into a sugar-coated fantasy hidden behind a protective barrier. So real. It felt so real. The air was thick and I was choking on it. The stink of rotting flesh suffocating my nose and throat. I could feel and taste pieces of her stuck between my teeth and under my tongue, gouged at the back of my throat and dripping from my lips and chin. She was all over me, everywhere. Lily was underneath me, a vicious and yet beautiful shade of red seeping across the stage. And yet, the smell of her was more of an aroma in my poisoned mind. She smelled like roast chicken and pot pie smothered in gravy. When Allison told me to drink in the memory and fully come to terms with what I had done, I did. She told me to anchor myself to my senses. Smell. The rotting, decomposing flesh carved into my fingernails and stuffing my mouth. Taste. Lily. No matter how horrifying the sight was in front of me, my body was still working to swallow her, to digest her despite parts of her creeping back up my throat in a thick, sour paste. What can you feel, Kira? When I was caught between two answers, the glacier-like breeze of the real world and the tough rope binding my hands, or the sickening memory slowly beginning to consume me, she reiterated that the memory was what she was talking about. I felt inside the memory as the real world was pulled away once the program realized it was seeping into me. I turned my head to the left and saw Wylan, his face illuminated by blinding stage lights lighting up the stage. Clumps of his thick, dark brown hair sticking to his forehead and beads of sweat glistening on his neck. The pair of Ray-Bans he had been wearing as his character in the play, Ben, were clenched in his left hand, while his right hand was nestled in mine. I felt his sticky and slimy fingers soaked in Lily, entangled with me. His mouth was a horror show of deep, dark red, smearing his lips and chin as he smiled at a standing ovation only he could see. Eyes as blank as the night sky, with zero traces of the teacher's pet I thought I knew. Something splintered. The lens of the glasses. And looking at the boy, whose eyes were starting to flicker, his smile thinning as the euphoria suffocating the four of us began to wear off. His self-awareness began to seep back into him, and the more it did, I heard the crunch of the glasses under the weight of fingers slowly curling into a fist. Still though, we bowed again and again, like bowing would hide the fact we had just eaten Lily Farah. Eliza, her smile was far too wide. Noah, his body starting to slump, his writhing fingers starting to claw at his hair. I should have felt disgust, because I was awake and aware of what I was doing. I attempted to wrench my hand from Wylan's, a sharp hiss escaping his lips. So many emotions slammed into me. Terror, agony, pain. But instead, my mouth was watering. My fingers caught in his grasp had a mind of their own. It was like drowning in an almost perfect darkness, which I wanted to push away and yet also revel in. I was itching to rip into soft, warm flesh and drink deep, gorge myself in gore, splattering the state in front of us. When I did, when I dropped to my knees and scooped up Lily's rotting remains and stuffed them into my mouth, I recoiled from the memory. This time, I was forceful. "Stop!" "As you wish, Kira." Allison's voice stumbled slightly, though I caught it, the crackle of static between each word spoken overhead. I blinked. Back on the bus, back in my seat, but this time, the windows were swallowed by intense blackness I couldn't see through. When I squinted, I sensed movement coming towards us. "They cannot hurt you, remember?" What you are seeing are visual depictions of what you see yourself as. While they can come very close during your closing treatment as your memories are being healed, they are harmless, the intercom said. If you would like to leave the simulation, which is recommended after completing your treatment, please say the dismantling code. It was a 4-digit number which should have appeared inside the memory. This time I knew I wasn't imagining it. Allison's voice was different. The dismantling code, or Protocol 4598-HGB, is the health and safety barrier put in place to protect you from possible hijacks to the procedure. But you no longer need to be protected. The voice sounded almost happy. We can get through this together. Would you like to go back to your physical body? The program was sounding progressively more human, and I wondered if it was part of the treatment. Maybe the AI had been given a more human-like voice to appear more sympathetic. Whatever it or she was, I needed her. It was a relief to finally have someone who sounded like she cared, after seeing the hellscape which was my 17-year-old self's memories. The program waited for a moment. Can you see the code, Kira? I nodded shakily. Yes. Say it, the program said. When the procedure is completed, the patient must give their consent to return to their physical body with their healed memories attached. We have healed exactly 85 out of 89 trauma instances, which allows you limited time in your physical body. Congratulations! Her voice jumped again. You are at 95%. You have done so well, Kira. But where am I? I asked. You are inside the Fix Me program. I mean, where is my physical body? There was a pause before she answered. Kira, we ask that you do not question authority. To ensure a safe and painless transition back to yourself, we require you admitting the code. Due to health and safety precautions put in place to protect you, only patients will see the dismantling code. Once again, to safely disengage you from the program, we need the code. How did you fix me? You did it yourself, Kira. The program was quick to answer, with lightning-fast efficiency. When coming to terms with your actions and fully removing the protective barriers put in place, you healed yourself. We knew you could do it. Aren't you called the Fix Me program? Kira, the code, the program said. Once we have it, we can begin the transition to a more stable mental state. Allison was never impatient. However, she was giving me a way out. There was nothing more I wanted than to escape my own mind. The realization was like a knife cutting through my spine. I killed her. I killed Lily. Not even that. I ate her. Something disgusting and monstrous had blossomed inside me, and I had really done that to my best friend. The words of my own admittance felt wrong and twisted in my mouth, enough to elicit a screech clawing at my throat. That one singular thought caused the bus to rock sideways. The ceiling started to crumble through, windows around me shattering. I dropped to my knees and pressed my hands over my ears. My chest felt like it was being suffocated. I killed her. I could feel my physical lips speaking the words. Still so far out of reach, in a world full of agony slicing through the back of my head and the numbing cold slowly sending me to sleep, I screamed, and something splattered the window. I didn't see it, but I could feel it seeping through the cracks and covering me, painting me in her. You did kill her, Kira, the program said. But that is what the Fix Me program is for. we are able to take it all away. When I lifted my head, the bus was falling apart under my feet. Tell us the code, and you will return to your body without these memories. You did kill her, Kira, the voice hummed. Do not worry. Input the code, and everything will be fine. You can make it go away? For a moment, as simulation and the real world collided, I sensed someone in front of my physical body. I felt warm breath grazing my cheeks, a startling relief from the ice cold. Of course I can, Kira, the voice hummed. Just tell me the code. As my thoughts began to calm down, the simulation began to piece itself back together in confusing, pixelated chunks I couldn't tear my gaze from. The bus ceiling came back together, seats popping out of existence, still occupied with the same shadows, faceless passengers with no identity. When the sky outside suddenly turned blue and the sun was shining in my eyes, I took my seat once again. 4879. The code was still in my head, and bracing myself against my seat, I opened my mouth. 4. At the corner of my eye, I saw a bird swooping across the sky. 8. The bird came closer, and I found myself leaning back. 7. When it slammed into the window pane, I didn't scream, even when the thing exploded on impact once again, coating the glass in thick, dripping red. Luckily, the program was soothing at the back of my mind, lulling my mind. They are just straying thoughts, she said. Allow yourself to detach from your trauma, Kira. Remember, you will not be able to remember this. Right, I thought dizzily. The thought of being blissfully ignorant of what I had done was too tempting. Selfish, but that insatiable need to forget what I had done and ultimately heal my mind was pleasure I didn't know existed. Don't! The voice, another human voice, cut into me like a knife, and it was enough to pull me closer to reality, to freezing cold air making me shiver, my numb fingers entangled with cutting rope. But the voice wasn't from the real world, the ice cold turning my skin blue or the hot breath in my face, speaking in disembodied tongues I couldn't understand. Instead, it was closer. At first I didn't recognize it. I was a blank slate with limited memories from my 17-year-old self. I had no idea who I had been as an 18 and then 19-year-old, 20 and 21. All of those years of my life had been washed away, numbed, with lingering pieces straying, like knowing I was used to being filled with drugs to numb my body and mind. Counting ceiling tiles was one of my favorite pastimes, and white was my favorite color. But the voice, I knew it. It may have sounded like a stranger at first, but I knew it from the memories forced onto me. I knew it from the drama club, from the shadow sitting behind me, the boy who couldn't sit still and regularly interrupted our teacher to either tell a crude joke or announce he needed a piss. Noah Emery. And when his name entered my mind, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow, one of the passengers without a face, suddenly did have a face. Noah, his 17-year-old self. Lily still covered him, painting his lips and chin. His torn blue and gold jersey he was using as a costume for the play, covered in her entrails, bedraggled brown curls hanging in otherwise amused eyes. While the guy still looked 17, the hollow look in his eyes showed his true age. The bus jolted sideways, and the boy flung out his arms to keep his balance before jumping into the seat opposite me. I couldn't look him in the eye when he looked like that. The boy was covered in scarlet, and his face, as well as the state of him, was an exact replica of that night, like I was staring directly at a memory. Noah Emery, Please return to your seat. The voice, which definitely wasn't Allison, said. Unlike Allison, it sounded almost pissed. Invading other passengers' consciousness is a direct offense of Protocol 67TR. This offense can be punishable by what we call brain rot. If you do not return to your seat and stop bothering the other passengers, I will be forced to pull you from the simulation. To my surprise, Noah laughed. It was the same laugh I knew, or at least my old self did. His laugh was more of a splutter. Ooh, right. Damn, would I love to see ya try. He shot back at the intercom. From the look on his face, I figured he and the voice, which was not Allison, had been sparring for a while. Noah rolled his eyes, leaning back in his seat. I couldn't move. I could still see pieces of Lily between his teeth. What's wrong? He frowned at himself and recoiled at the state of himself. Oh, shit. Yeah. Hold on a sec. To my surprise, his costume slowly morphed into a black short-sleeved tee and sweatpants. A soda appeared in his hand. Noah cracked it open, nodding at me. Want one? What? He pulled his legs to his chest, resting his chin on his knees, seemingly getting comfy on his seat. Noah raised a brow. The boy saluted me with a soda, a fresh can of Coke. I mean, a drink, dude. I've got pretty much anything you can imagine. I shook my head. How are you here? I'm sorry, did I miss something? How are you able to make soda magically appear? Noah shrugged. It's a simulation. We can do anything we want. He paused before mockingly looking left and then right, before leaning over and hissing. Everything except get off this fucking bus. I'd rather be on a beach, or maybe home. But you're... I twisted around to point at the other passengers. Noah's lips curved into the class clown grin, which tugged at memories buried deep. He leaned back in his seat with a sigh, and once again, even simulation Noah couldn't keep still, his knees bouncing against each other. Unplugged? He scoffed. Well, yeah. You guys are all stuck in the fucking Matrix, reliving whatever bullshit we did to get ourselves stuck in here. And me... He sipped the soda and exhaled out a breath. I'm just chilling, man. It's aight. It's actually pretty fun when R2-D2 isn't putting me on a timeout. He nodded at the ceiling. Yeah, babe, I'm talking about you. He held up the soda. We could have had something, you know? But no, you spent all of your robot time making sure I have zero fucking fun and am boring myself to death. Before I could speak, Noah pulled a face. Being ripped apart by hell beasts is not fun, though. If you do find a door, and it will take serious mental capacity to imagine one, he leaned forward with a grin. They'll get ya, Key. And they're fast. I ignored his latter words for a moment. How? I hissed out. How are you? I mean... My gaze flicked to the back of the bus where the remaining passengers, lacking identities, more like faceless shadows, still sat, unmoving. Noah followed my gaze and rolled his eyes. How are you here? His demeanor darkened, and I was all too aware of the boy's expression almost glitching. From the boy I remembered to a shadow with his face and haunted eyes I couldn't fully take in. The better question, Key? His lips twisted. Something in him seemed to change or revert. It was almost like the simulation was trying to show us the versions of ourselves we wanted to see, but it was struggling, and in blink and you will miss it moments, our real selves began to seep through the cracks in the program. His eyes were a shade of black, almost blank, and I couldn't understand them. The lights dimmed overhead, and I glimpsed something starting to come through those slowly growing cracks splintering into holes inside the simulation. Something dark and twisted coiled around his right elbow. Immediately, I knew what it was and where it had come from. It was the exact same symbol Lily had carved into our desks in her desperation to tell our group that we were doomed. And there it was, an intricately drawn tattoo painted and then cut and carved into his flesh to make it permanent. Noah noticed me staring and folded his arms, making an attempt to hide the strange rune-like markings creeping up his upper arm, expanding over his shoulder. Dude, it's rude to stare. Noah held my gaze, hiding obsidian markings, his hand creeping up his elbow. I caught his fingernails digging deep, as if he wanted to claw it away. But anyway, Noah let out a breath, sputtering into a laugh. Why? He downed his soda. Why would you ever want to go back? What? Well, the treatment they put us through, you know? When they forced us to live all of this dark shit we did. Noah trailed off, stumbling over his words. I could see a certain vulnerability in him he was trying to hide. The way his whole body was trembling, not just his knees. Now that I was paying full attention, his fingers tiptoeing up his arm and grasping hold of his flesh-tainted obsidian. I completed it, he said. I was given a choice whether to return to my body, my physical self in the real world, or stay here. Noah patted his seat with a forced grin, and of course, I decided to stay here. Something slimy squirmed its way down my spine. You've seen everything? I swallowed, my gut creeping into the back of my mouth. He rested his chin on his knees with a sigh. Yep, every single filthy fucking detail, Key. I couldn't help it, the questioning swarming my mind. What did we do? I swallowed. This program tells me I have multiple convictions. He pulled a face. Yeah, we all do. It's called being seriously f***ed in the head. Noah prodded his temples with 2 fingers. They should have killed us when they had the chance. In fact, I am waiting for my own personal frontal lobotomy. Because I shook my head, my hands trembling in my lap. Because we ate Lily? Noah looked up at me, and at first I thought he was going to laugh before his smile twisted into a look of pain, unbridled despair, which once again began to show me snapshots of his present self. You're kidding, he said. No, you idiot, because of what we did after. His words sent pinpricks down my spine. After? Noah Emery, the intercom crackled. Please return to your seat immediately. If you continue to bother other passengers, we will be forced to pull you from the simulation and interpolate brain rot. This will not be a pleasant experience for you. All right, Noah groaned, jumping up. Give me a minute. Key and me, we go way back. So let me talk to her. You have a minute, starting now. 59, 58. Whatever you do, he said in a low murmur, whatever they show you, you can't give them the dismantling code. Why? I've seen what we did. His voice shook. The real world. The real us. I know you can sense it, Key. The cold, the ice cold which is slowly killing us, the breath in front of your face you think you know, and the promise that we'll be healed. His tone darkened, collapsing into a hiss. If you know what is good for you, His grip tightened on my shoulder. "You'll leave curiosity alone and let us fucking rot in here." I tried to pull away, but he held on, and I could sense his fingernails suddenly caked with her, his breath stinking of her rotten flesh. "Trust me, Kira." He pointed to himself. "Who we are right now inside here is before it all went, wrong. 17 years old with our whole lives ahead of us. Post-school play, doing what we did to Lily and everything after. All the shit that put us in here in the first place. Those parts of us don't exist anymore." I could sense his emotion, agony he was trying to hide. "We're safe here, Key. We can stay here." He let out a sigh. "Before we, ate our fucking classmate and engage in acts which definitely justify sending us to rot in fake paradise." I started to argue, because Noah was crazy for wanting to stay in this prison where our memories were forced onto us. As if sensing my protest, he pulled away, and this time, I could see him without the blood. He looked so much younger, and I wanted that version of him to stay, before he doused himself in Lily's blood, drowning in her. "What would you rather do? Live in blissful ignorance in here, chilling inside the version of yourself which was never fucked up, or start to remember?" The air in front of us glitched suddenly. The bus twisted into our school stage, our parents screaming at us, being held back by police, and in the middle of the audience stood our drama teacher, Mrs. Beck, her smile wide, splitting open her mouth. She was the only one clapping. Inside an auditorium filled with chaos and white noise, the crowd's cries bleeding into one singular string of white noise. The sight of her sitting calmly and clapping sent shivers ripping through my real body. The simulation darkened once more around us. Noah's face contorted into something monstrous, animalistic. Lily's blood was no longer just a meal. Now she was part of the intricate lines staining his skin, like tribal tattoos. He opened his mouth, upper incisors sharpened. I blinked, and I could see those same rune-like markings. Not just his elbow. They were carved all the way down his neck and arms, while half of his hair had been sheared off and painted in deep, dark red. Noah must have seen my expression. He inclined his head, but the boy's eyes were black, drowned, suffocated by a darkness I could and would never understand. "Key?" There was something writhing under his skin, and once I was seeing it, I felt movement in my own gut, kicking, like something was trying to burst from me. "Are you okay?" Pain struck the back of my skull, and I could feel something protruding into my neck and spine. It was sharp and cutting, stuck, driven into my flesh. With every splinter of the real Noah came reality, forcing itself into the forefront of my mind. Ice-cold air mixing with warm breath in my face. "Noah Emery," the voice said, which snapped me back to the simulation. The runes cutting into his flesh were gone. Noah looked like himself again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it would keep happening the more I looked at him, like the real world was becoming more and more clear, no matter how forceful the program was. "Please return to your seat immediately." Noah didn't move, only rolling his eyes, his clownish smile returning. "Wait for it. This is your final warning. I'm going." With an exaggerated groan, he made a deal of walking, or rather, dragging himself backwards. With 2 fingers, he saluted me. "Remember what I said." Noah mimed, cutting his throat. "Mr. Emery, attempting to invade other passengers' consciousness as well as influencing their thoughts is a direct offense of Protocol 67TR. Please return to your seat and resume self-reflection. We ask you this so we can maintain a safe environment. Yeah, whatever, R2-D2. And just like he never existed, Noah, after stumbling over to the back of the bus, a snapshot of who I knew best, the class clown wearing the oversized football jersey, joined the three motionless shadows, his identity bleeding into null nothing. I was alone again, choking on my own breath. Turning to the window, the sky was a darker blue. This is normal, Kira. Outside the window reflects your current mental state inside your memory. Would you like me to replace it? I can make it anything you would like. For example, the view of Mount Fuji on vacation in Japan. It is a precious memory and an image you hold close to your heart. If you would like, I can turn the view into something much suited to your taste. Would you like that? No. Very well. Are you able to resume treatment? We apologize for the inconvenience. Do I have a choice? Well, yes, of course. However, we do urge patients to engage in memories to quicken the healing process. What about earlier? I tried to focus on the other passengers to try and imagine faces, but there was nothing. Once again, Noah was back to being a null void existing at the back of the bus. You seemed fine with letting me out. What changed? A pause. I apologize, Kira. I do not understand your question. As your personal nurse, it is far too early to start the transition to your physical body. Ending the simulation halfway through treatment is extremely dangerous. Patients may never wake up or revert to their original state before treatment, which would be severe. You are confused. Do you need more time to think? Something cold slithered down my spine, but I pushed the thought away. I wasn't crazy, right? The voice trying to get the dismantling code, and the one which had spoken to Noah, definitely wasn't Allison. Are you still Allison? I am the Fix Me program, Kira. Are you able to resume? I do not mean to rush you, but patients are required to either be undergoing treatment or in self-reflection. Sure, but first, where am I? You are in the... No, right now. I know I'm in the Fix Me program. I mean, my actual body. Kira, I am unable to give you that information. Please, I said. You asked earlier if I wanted to know my convictions. Surely you could tell me how I got here, right? I am unable to calculate your current location. However, I can assure you, you are inside our state-of-the-art facility. Due to the Kilbride incident which devastated your entire town, you were brought here 4 months ago to undergo emergency treatment. In a private trial between government personnel, the judge ruled that it was either you were put through the Fix Me program to revert you to a previous stable mental state before you underwent significant trauma, or be given the death penalty. Many parties argue that the cause of your actions were influenced by a second party, and thus your actions could be justified. After deliberation, the judge agreed, and you were sentenced here to undergo treatment which will fix you. Her words played on my mind. The real world definitely didn't feel like a facility. It was cold. I was somehow outside, freezing to death. Kira, are you able to resume the treatment? Yes. Good. Now I must warn you, your memories where your mental state is significantly low will cause you distress. Unfortunately, I will be restricting the use of your arms to prevent self-inflicted injury. Do not worry, Kira. I felt it automatically, the sensation of stars filling me, numbing my body. My head hit the window, and I closed my eyes. As always, Kira, I will begin with a question. What did you do on the evening following opening night? I was back on stage, staring down at my hands. slick with glistening scarlet, Snapping out of the trance which had held me, I sucked in a breath, my vision clearing. I turned to Wylan and the boy's gaze found mine. I couldn't see the blood, the gore all over him. I think Allison was blocking it out at that moment. He tugged his hand from mine. The manic excitement in his eyes was flooded with a primal fear, an agony which sent him stumbling away muttering gibberish to himself. No. Wylan stared down at his bloody hands and then his costume. No, this isn't happening. This is a sick joke. Mom? I managed to choke out, sputtering on beads of red dripping down my chin. Mom! My mom. She wasn't there. I searched for her face in the shadow, on my knees, spitting out pieces of Lily. Hey! Someone's hands grasped hold of mine, and I was yanked backstage. Wylan, who had gotten a hold of himself. Hey, it's okay. You're okay. He shook his head. We did a bad thing, and we need to get out of here. His eyes were blank. I couldn't see traces of the teacher's sped I thought I knew. I was sobbing, screaming, and his arms were around me, grasping me. We'll go out of the back door, he whispered. Okay, Key? Wylan dragged me and the others into an awkward hustle, the four of us grasping each other, like we were on the football field. Listen to me very, very carefully, Wylan said through hysteric hisses. They're going to want answers we can't give them. We can't explain what we just fucking did. So we need to run. I know her. At least, I had my suspicions. And if she is who I think she is, we need to get out of here right now. Whew, I managed to get out in a slur. Are you deaf? He hissed. Mrs. Beck. I think she's a survivor. I saw her face on TV when I was a kid, and I think they wiped the fucking footage. He was grasping for breath, and this was the first time I'd seen the teacher's pet lose his cool. They wiped every trace of it. Every trace of it. A survivor of what? Eliza shrieked. Wylan swiped at his bloody chin, letting out a strangled breath. I'll explain when we're out of here. The memory shuddered, and the four of us were half running, half stumbling towards the back exit. What the fucking fuck? Noah was shrieking, his bloody arms around Eliza. What did we do? Lily. Fucking Lily. I don't know, Wylan said in a whimper, urging us into a stumbled run. Key. He tugged me when I didn't move, when I was suddenly aware that every piece of me was coated with her. Key! Jesus Christ! We don't have time for this! Footsteps came down the hall, and Wylan dragged us back. Back door, he said. Now! Why? I spluttered the word while he dragged me, and I felt like I was flying. Why are we running? We need the cops. We need the cops. Because... Wylan spoke under his breath, his words hanging stagnant in the air when we came to an abrupt stop, where something was inching across the corridor, a shadow, a lifelike shadow, bleeding across the walls. And standing, still clapping gleefully, was Mrs. Beck. Around her, shadows sprouted from every corner, and we were surrounded, stumbling back. Wylan gripped my hand tighter, and however slimy it was, tainted with Lily, it was still some kind of comfort. With the edge of my tongue, I dug a piece of her from my teeth, my mouth watering. My stomach felt sickeningly empty, and staring down my hands, I had a sudden insatiable need to lick Lily from my fingers. Just the thought made me sick. Because, Wylan groaned, there was something inside that fucking wine. He blew a raspberry. Obviously, Obviously. Mrs. Beck nodded. Yes, Wylan, she said, as shadows bled across the floor. As if they were sentient, they inched closer to us. Thank you for once again admitting you are a smart-ass little brat. The teacher pointed at her own lips, and then her chin. But you have something on your... Never mind. Her eyes found mine. But seriously, are you not going to remind your peers of our agreement? Indeed, I am a survivor. Mrs. Beck's eyes glittered. Which they, of course, wiped from the headlines in case it got out that I didn't exactly come back alone. Mrs. Beck's voice was enough to jolt my body, sending shockwaves spiking through me. Might I congratulate you? She said. That was a perfect performance. You really showed an authentic look at survival. And might we celebrate your opening night with a drink? She held up the bottle of wine. And some truths. Her smile widened, and for reasons I will never understand, I trusted it. Before we take this production to, let's say, the next level? My head spun when I was yanked back to the bus. So many questions I had. Though it took me a moment to realize me being pulled from the memory was not supposed to happen. The foundations of the simulation began to falter, and I started to see what was at the root of it. Deeply embedded code entangled with my brain. The shadows at the back suddenly had faces, their teen selves, thankfully. Eliza, sitting with her knees to her chest. Noah, blank eyes on the ceiling. Wylan, his head bowed, eyes closed. They looked exactly like they did on opening night, still in their costumes, soaked in my best friend. It was surreal, seeing them turning from shadows to people I knew, from what I had been forced to see. Another jolt, and the three of them came to life suddenly, their frightened eyes finding mine. Noah jumped up automatically, his lips curled into a snarl. Key, he gritted out. What did you do? Eliza's lip wobbled, her frantic gaze searching for a way out. No, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Is anyone planning on telling me what the f*** is going on? Wylan was the only one who hadn't jumped from his seat. Instead, he shuffled back, his knees to his chest. Noah scrubbed his face with his hands. Yeah, we know. We were all in our own individual self-reflection treatment. But the better question is, Kira here? His glaring eyes found mine. Did something. Noah grabbed a seat when the bus rattled. Did you give those bastards the code? When I couldn't answer, he tipped his head back. Are you f***ing kidding me? No, I don't understand. Wylan's voice, which was very unwylan, because the boy was almost in tears. I don't understand what's going on. His eyes found mine, though I found no recognition in his eyes. It was like staring at a completely blank slate. Who the hell are you? Eliza blinked, and Noah, for a moment, looked confused before he slapped himself in the face. Of course he did. He rolled his eyes. The teacher's pet couldn't stand his own memory, so he chose the other option. Noah's gaze met mine, two pools of oblivion glaring back. He chose reset, what I like to call it, running a f***ing away. What? Eliza lifted her head, her eyes red from crying. What does that even mean? It means he's a coward, Liza. I apologize, patient 067, 068, 069, and 070. Allison's voice prickled on the intercom, grabbing our attention. Due to a manual override, I am unable to extract you from the simulation. We ask that you please remove the device quickly and safely if you can. Please remove the device immediately. Can you hear me? I can't get through. Do not remove the device under any circumstance. Protocol 678 has been authorized. We are being hijacked. I repeat, we are being hijacked. Can you understand me? Emergency down has been over. We cannot update the system. The simulation came apart once again, pixelating like a video game. I found myself at home, standing in my kitchen. Think clearly, Kira. The voice this time spoke from in front of my physical self, warm breath tickling my frozen lips. So we can pull you from this ridiculous technology. That voice. I blinked. In the memory, a body hung from a hook, skinned and headless. The head had been slowly cut and sliced into pieces and added to the stewing pot in my hands. I could still see her hair. Mom. Oh, God, Mom. Is this what I did? Is this what I did to my mom? All at once I was spiraling, and yet in the memory I held no emotion. I was a blank, nothing with a wide, feral smile. Wylan joined me as I moved in slow strides with a boiling pot clutched to my chest. He was older, 18 or maybe 19. His left eye was swollen shut, a rune sliced right through it. Like Noah, obsidian tattoos wrapped around his lower wrist and arm. Rich darkness curled around each of his fingers. Lily saw this. I felt sick. She really did see us sinking into the abyss. I brought the pot outside to kids I recognized, adults, neighbors. All of them knelt in front of us, bowls in front of them. My street was pitch dark, candlelight illuminating each window, and a ritualistic drum thudding down the road, getting closer and closer to my house. Thud. Thud. I placed the steaming pot in front of our mayor, who lurched back, restrained by Noah and Eliza. Her cavernous eyes lit up in an orange glow as she smiled through a mouthful of stringy flesh. No, this couldn't be me. The code, Kira. Say it, and I can make this go away. 4879. I whispered with no hesitation. I couldn't deal with it, with the sight of what I had done to my mother. Kira? Allison's voice shook. I do not recommend severing yourself from the program. While I am no longer in control, I can only advise. Kira, you will revert to the self we are trying to... Get me out! I shrieked, followed by the dismantling code, which sent everything imploding around me and pulling me back. Well, I did break from the simulation eventually. I would have rather stayed in there.